Hello and welcome to Progress Not Perfection. My name is Della and I'm back at the City County building, but right now, you see where I'm at. I'm in the Sheriff's office about to interview someone that does amazing things in the recovery community. She helps inmates that are addicts find treatment, availability, anything that they might need. She does this for them. And I can't wait to meet her. I have never met her before, but I've heard great things about her. So, without further ado, let's go inside and meet Samantha Monday. And it's a good feeling to come here and not be behind the other walls. And I have a very special guest, Miss Samantha Monday. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So, I want to make you completely aware this will be televised on KCM as well as my YouTube channel.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yes.
All right. Yay, here we go. Let's get to know you. What is your job title exactly?
I'm a case manager within the Sheriff's Office that specializes in people with substance use disorder.
So, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Because that doesn't sound like something a kid would be like, I want to work with drug addicted inmates. So,
No, there's a period of time I wanted to be an astronaut. There's a period of time I wanted to be a nurse. I went through a lot of different phases, even in my adulthood, about what I wanted to be when I grew up. And sometimes I still wonder what I want to be when I grow up. So,
well, I think what you're doing now is absolutely amazing. Can you better describe what you do?
so basically, I take referrals to the court system. Those referrals are signed off by the judges and they come to me. Then I go do a biopsychosocial assessment on that inmate, do a report if needed, and then I set up all the things that that individual may need in their transition back into the community. So that could be treatment, it could be mental health, it could be an IOP, it could be sober living, it could be a Vivitrol appointment, it could be any number of things. Up to and including we have a clothing closet that we take donations for, and I use that to give people clothes and toiletries for when they go into treatment, so they're not worried about how they look and how they smell, and they can actually focus on why they're there.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So, what do you think is the most important part of your job?
Well, the assessment is probably the most important part because that's where I get to know that individual and what their needs are. Because if I can't set them up and meet their needs, then they're going to fail, most likely.
So you get to know them. Is that how you know what each individual needs?
Yeah, so I talk to them about everything about from their drug history to their social history to where they were living, what was their childhood like, do they have any trauma, do they have anything that needs to be addressed. And sometimes I get, I learn things about people that I can't unhear that's, very traumatizing to me. Secondary trauma is a real thing, and then I have to process it too. But, the fact that these people are willing to share that stuff with me and trust me with that information just warms my heart and makes me feel very loved and respected by these people. I've had many, especially male inmates, who share with me their sexual trauma, and I'm the first person they've ever told.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from other inmates telling them that they can trust me, and they finally come out with that, and that is a very, you can see the relief leave their body when they finally admit what's happened to them. And then it's a matter of making sure that those things are addressed when they leave in the manner that they are ready for them to be addressed. Because if they're not ready for the full-fledged, let me throw you into therapy on a weekly basis and a group setting and all the things that come with that, they have to be met where they are.
Right. And that's a very hard first step is admitting or like what's went on in your past.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to sexual abuse, because that's why I began using was due to sexual abuse.
Yeah.
I was 9 years old when I began using, and I've heard so much about you and that you're just amazing from what I hear. They call you the juggler, I think, because you've got so many balls in the air at once. You've just got so much going on.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I'll carry caseload sometimes 30 to 50 people that are incarcerated, and those aren't my only people. I've got people that I've moved back into the community that I keep in touch with. so I know what's going on with them. Just today I had a gentleman in court who the DA called me last night and was like, what's going on with him? And I had followed up and gotten an update from his case manager and his therapist and all the people involved in his care last week, and was able to do that, which resulted in a better court day for him today.
That's amazing. I love how you keep in contact with them after that.
I mean, I can't keep in contact with all of them. That would be
No.
impossible.
Yeah.
Because I work with about 250 to 300 people a year. So.
Wow. And especially with them being incarcerated, that's going to take up some time.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
To get a little bit more personal, has anyone close to you ever struggled with a drug addiction?
Yeah, I've had several family members who have struggled with addiction on various levels. I had a grandfather that was an alcoholic. I've had aunts and uncles who have struggled. My mom has struggled some. And at 56, I lost an aunt to an overdose. She passed about 24 hours later after the overdose, but that was the reason for it. I've definitely been affected personally by drugs and alcohol. Yeah. I've seen it my whole life.
I'm so sorry for your loss. And I know it's hard. I was raised around drugs and alcohol too.
Yeah.
So is that what makes you so passionate about helping drug addicts?
Probably. Growing up, I had, one side of my family had some drug issues and the other side won't take Tylenol. So I had both sides of the fence. But when I started, kind of flipped my career around and got into the criminal justice world, I came in as a PO in another county. And I got really frustrated with the insanity of, let me drug screen people, lock them up, let them sit in jail for 10 to 14 days, let them get released, let them have the weekend, then come back to my office so I can drug screen them again to lock them back up. And it made no sense to me to do that. In that particular county, it was a smaller county, they didn't really have any, they had a drug court program that was fabulous, but they didn't have really a treatment center, they didn't really have much of an IOP at the time, and this has been many years ago, but I basically self-taught what grants were out there. I made phone calls to anybody that would talk to me. I did research on my own time, and I figured out how to get people funding for treatment. And next thing I know, I was getting handed files by all the other POs in the building to try to figure out what to do. I had people come in that were detoxing in my office floor. I had all kinds of crazy stuff going with that. From there, then I ended up leaving there and coming to Knox County, and I worked at CAP, the Community Corrections Office here, and had a role there that's somewhat similar to what I do now, where I was assessing inmates and making treatment plans, but they were coming on to community corrections. So I was making that decision where the community corrections was appropriate level of supervision for them. And I really enjoyed that job, and it helped me evolve as far as like understanding more of the addicted population.
Right.
And I was able to sit back and kind of look at our community as a whole and kind of figure out where there was some holes, so to speak, that was holding people in custody, because defense attorneys are not trained clinicians and they don't know how to do a lot of the stuff that I do on a daily basis. From there, I moved to the Department of Corrections. I went in as a PO, moved to a correctional counselor, and then while I was there, that's when I started my training for my licensed alcohol and drug counselor, and that was shortly after I'd finished my master's degree. But I was doing that there, and then along the way, I met with Chief Brian Bivens with the Sheriff's Office and pitched an idea to him for what is now my current position. He thought I was crazy at first, because I just said, look, these defense attorneys don't know what they're doing, and we're holding people in an overcrowded jail for long, extended periods of time, waiting on a bed date that their attorney doesn't know how to get. And so I pitched that and gave him the ideas as far as, what that would look like on paper. And about 9 months later, I walked back into the sheriff's office into this position.
Wow.
So we have now expanded this program Lakin Conley is my partner in crime, so to speak. She works with me on a daily basis. We are in communication all day long, every day, sometimes even when we're not on the clock. And she does a fabulous job, and she works with just as many, if not more, inmates in a year than I do. And we kind of split up the workflow. She works primarily in Sessions Court. I work primarily in criminal court. But there's always a crossover with those inmates that'll have charges downstairs and upstairs, so to speak. But we work together on that stuff best we can. We bounce cases off one another, and she does a fabulous job. And I'm very, very thankful for her, because for about 2 years before she came along, I was by myself doing all of these courts. And I was working ridiculous amounts of hours. So I'm thankful for her on a daily basis, and she does a great job at working with these guys and keeping up with them when they're out. And she's worked many an hour with people out of custody to keep them from a relapse or helping them rework a treatment plan. So I'm thankful for her, and I'm thankful for Brian Bivens to kind of see in my vision to create this program that we have. And like I said, it's grown over the last 5.5 years and evolved. It's taken some time to get it what it is, but I'm very thankful for what I do. I love it on a daily basis.
I love that you love it. So she has been with you for 2 years.
She's been with me for 3.
For 3. So how long have you been doing this job?
So I came back to the sheriff's office in August of 2017. And it took, I came in on a grant position, and it took some time to get everything set up. When you have a grant, you have to get a committee of people together, and everybody has to agree, and you have to have your stakeholders and do all that. And then on top of that, because I was working inside the jail, which I had been in and out of the jail when I worked at CAT, but because I was primarily there, I had to go through some of the training that the state of Tennessee requires. That took some time, and then just getting everything ready to go and everybody on the same page. So I took my first referral from Felony Sessions Court in November of that year. And I think November and December I got out somewhere like 13 or 14 people that year. And then it just kind of grew and grew and grew. And then sometime in spring of 18, I started taking referrals from criminal court. And then it got overwhelming. Probably by the summer that year, I was overwhelmed. But it was a good thing. And the way this is set up, we have the public defender's office, and they do a fabulous job, and they have their social workers there who do what we do for their folks. Right. And then we work with everybody else. So, we work with all the appointed attorneys, and there's 40, 50, 60 of them at any given time. So we're in communication with a lot of people on a daily basis.
Yeah. I see you have 2 phones, and that must drive you crazy sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. I've learned over time to set good boundaries when I get home, and my work phone goes on silence. And I do check it a couple of times in the evening to make sure there's not somebody who needs me or something pressing. But I've learned to silence that phone and put it down and walk away from it.
That's good. Setting boundaries it's hard to do, but So
it definitely has to happen. So
after speaking with so many different inmates and people, what do you think are some of the most common reasons people use drugs to begin with?
Adverse childhood experiences is probably the number one cause. Trauma, sexual trauma is another driving force, particularly with the females. But, addiction doesn't discriminate, and people end up addicted for any number of reasons. I have worked with people who had amazing jobs and had an amazing childhood and had, went to college and did everything right, and they got their job making, $150,000 a year. And then they find themselves looking at me inside the jail over one use on a Friday night, turned very quickly into 3 months later. They don't have anything. They don't have a job. They don't have a house. They don't have anything. So addiction doesn't discriminate, and it comes, unfortunately, it can get anybody. But I would say ACEs is probably the number one cause for most, but it could really be any reason.
So, have you noticed an increase in drug offenses in the past 5 years or a decrease?
I mean, I try really hard not to look at charges too much with folks. I mean, obviously I have to know because I'm working with them in court. I do that because their charge, it matters, but it doesn't really matter that much to me.
Right.
Obviously, everybody I work with dealing with an addiction issue. So, I mean, I don't know that it's went up as much as the problems are worse than they once were as far as the overdoses and the types of drugs people are using. And that evolves over time. I mean, at one point in time, cocaine was the number one drug people were using, and then it was marijuana, and then it was, whatever. And obviously now fentanyl is the biggest issue we've got going on.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's changed too much. Obviously, the drug charges are there, but the thing is the theft charges are because people are trying to steal to get money for drugs. So it's all drug connected, but I don't know that I would say there's a major increase in the actual drug charges.
Speaking of overdose, have you seen an increase of that?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I've lost a lot of folks who I've helped and worked with over time, get out. And obviously that first 5 days when they get out of custody is the scariest time because that's, if they're going to use, that's usually when they use. And they go back to using whatever they were using and the amount they were using prior to coming to jail. And their body, as I said, in jail is detoxed and they don't have the tolerance they once had.
Yeah.
So that's the most dangerous time when somebody gets out of custody. So, I've lost a lot over time, and COVID, 2020 was awful to the recovery community. I watched many of people, people who had 10 and 20 years clean that were the sponsors that held the hands of the new people in recovery, were losing their jobs because of COVID, and then that caused them to lose their housing, and then they went back to old coping mechanisms. And so our recovery community took a huge hit with COVID overall.
Yeah.
We lost some of those tried and true folks that were the good sponsors, because they were back at, day one if we didn't lose them to an overdose during that time. So, and obviously over time that's gotten better as we've gotten away from COVID, but the overdoses are they're awful.
Yeah. I've lost many people to overdoses.
Yeah.
And it's like second nature now. You get on Facebook and it's like RIP such and such. And I've said this before, but it's like I cry, but I can't cry. It's common.
Yeah.
And it's very sad. So what would you say the percentage is for a person to reoffend in the first year?
Well, I don't know. I mean, honestly, a lot of the folks that I work with are on violations of probation because they failed a drug screen. Sometimes it's because they got new charges. Recidivism is a tricky thing to try to figure out because, technically it doesn't count as recidivism unless it's in the first 3 years. So the first year, it's really hard to say what the answer to that question is. I mean, I see some people who reoffend, but most of my people are coming back in for VOPs for drug screens.
I was going to ask you if violations were more common than reoffending.
Well, and sometimes those reoffenses are driving on suspendeds or simple possessions, or simple things like that. And I see that a lot if somebody does collect something new. And again, most of my folks are convicted felons. They're picking up something misdemeanor. So it's not something that's something hardcore again,
Yeah. But still back in the system you go. And it sucks because I've been in the system. So, So being inside of the jail, is there a detox program in jail? Like if someone's on a serious drug and it could really hurt them, is there something like that in the jail?
So the two substances that we are all most concerned with when somebody starts to detox are going to be the benzos and alcohol, because those detoxes can actually result in somebody's death. as long as people are open and honest with us when they come in, and sometimes they are not, and sometimes they come in and they're intoxicated and they don't want to tell us what they're using.
Right.
But if they tell us that, yes, I've been, drinking, whatever, ever how much, or I've been using Xanax every day for the last, month, then we do have protocols in place for that. Our providers will step in and they will make sure that they are on a taper that, and they will get usually placed in medical so that they're being watched through that detox to make sure they're safe.
That's good. That's really good. I've always wondered that.
Yeah.
So do you think that there are things that the jail could do to help an addict better?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously, more programs would be helpful for folks, but that takes time, money, and effort.
Right.
And, and honestly, we have a space problem, honestly, because we have so many programs going on with churches, and we have a lot of NA and AA that goes on, and Celebrate Recoveries and things like that. So we are starting to get to a place where we have a space problem. Yeah. Just because we don't have anywhere else to hold a group or how to have a class or something. Because we honestly, our programs department does an amazing job. We have people coming in with KnoxWorks who helps people get a job when they, set them up for when they get out to help them get a job. We've got the Y coming in doing programs. We've got Helen Ross McNabb coming in doing programs. So we've got a lot of stuff going on at any given time throughout the day and evening. There, and we have some great people in our community who are leaders in the recovery community who come in and do an NA meeting.
Yeah.
That's the way they give back. And so we've got a lot going on. Obviously, for me, I would love to see, we have ITP, which is a 90-day program with the MRT curriculum.
I was in ITP and I absolutely loved it. I was a part of I don't know if it's still there, Unbroken.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of Unbroken.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I would love to see some additional programs and things like that. But obviously that's going to take space. If I had more hours in the day, I would probably be down trying to do groups with folks too. But between being in court most days and then doing assessments and trying to set up stuff, there's just not enough time.
I feel like you do enough. Like, people call me extra, but you're extra. So, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm pretty sure that you've heard the phrase, once an addict, always an addict. When someone says that, how does that make you feel?
Well, there's some truth to that statement, but they're an addict in recovery. Mm-hmm. So I think that phrase needs a little work. I work with people hardcore, and I'm like, you're in recovery. You're not in active addiction anymore. Mm-hmm. And I despise the word junkie. I despise it. I don't want people to use it. And I definitely don't want people using it to refer to themselves. Because
I was bad for that.
Yeah, once you've stepped into that world of recovery and you've changed your life, those words don't ever need to come out of your mouth, especially referring to your own self.
Yeah. I was bad when I was in active addiction. I'm a junkie. What do you want me to say? But I don't think I really called myself a junkie in a really long time. Now I just say that I was addicted and then became completely dependent on, like, when I was on heroin. I wasn't addicted. I was completely dependent on heroin. Yeah. And that happens.
Yeah, and dependency is psychological and it's physical.
Yeah. And especially with methamphetamine, that's where the psychological, that really messed with me. Yeah. But I'm happy with where I am today.
Awesome.
Do you believe that addiction is a disease?
I do.
You do?
Mm-hmm. I definitely do. There's many studies that support that. I mean, I believe that some people, they think it's a choice, and that first use might have been a choice, but to continue to use is not always a choice.
Yeah. I feel like, I was addicted. I was an addict for over 20 years, and like I said, I was dependent. But, once I made that decision to be in recovery, if I go back out right now and I use, that's a choice. So I completely agree with you on that. And I've come to accept that I'll always have the disease of addiction. I mean, it's always up on the table at any given time.
I frequently share with my clients. So I have a friend of mine who is, I don't know, she's approaching 40 years sober. And somewhere around the 35-year mark, we were at dinner and we were talking about, she works in the field, and talking about the crazy week we'd had and the crazy clients we'd had, and trying to find solutions to problems and those kind of things. And she was like, I'd love to have a drink. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? She's like, don't worry, I'm not going to. She's like, but don't think it still doesn't cross my mind.
Yeah.
And this is somebody with 30, at that point, or somewhere around 35 years clean. So even when people have that much clean time, it's still there.
Yeah.
And, and I wouldn't go as far as saying at that point it's a craving as much as it's like, if I had that to cope, I'd feel better about myself right now in this moment.
Yeah.
And it's just a thought that they have. And I tell people all the time, the longer you're sober and you're in recovery, the easier it is to walk away.
It's very true. So, like I said, I love what you're doing now, but what is the next step for you? What's your goals for the future?
I don't really know. That changes some. I would love to be some sort of program director, perhaps with the sheriff's office. I know my chief retires here in a couple of years, so we'll see. I don't know. And I've also debated private practice, those kind of things. And I do some private practice on the side now, very, very minimal. But that's a possibility as well. So I don't really know. I'm currently working, or I'll be starting working toward my QCS, so I'll have that hopefully next year. So I'll be helping to train other counselors. But yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. It's kind of up in the air. But every day is a new adventure when you're working with addicts.
It's very true. So I ask everybody the same two questions at the end of my show. And this is just a matter of opinion. But what do you think we could do as a community to better help the addict that wants and seeks the help but doesn't have the means to do so, such as no insurance, grant, money, family?
Well, I think everyone needs to call our governor, because he continues to cut the funding for our programs in East Tennessee. And we have at one point, and I don't know what the current number is, but it was like 91 beds across the state, the entire state of Tennessee, for detox. We don't have enough detox beds for people. We don't have enough treatment beds for people. We don't have enough available Vivitrol for people who want it. And our insurance is a disaster. And a lot of people don't realize Medicare and Medicaid facilities are few and far between in East Tennessee, and the insurance protocols are so tight that anybody that's coming to jail is not going to be able to get treatment, because they have to be positive when they show up there, and it has to be within 3 days of their last use. Commercial insurance is a whole nother, tangled mess. So it would be nice to have places that would take anybody, insurance or not, instead of having to fight for things. If people, even with TennCare, are in custody sometimes more than a month, we can't get them approved for treatment. So it's all a big problem. It's a game. Insurance is a game, and our grants, if somebody has insurance, won't pay. It doesn't matter how bad they need it. If they've got TennCare, even if they've been sitting in jail 6 months and they were using 5 grams of heroin a day, nobody cares. Yeah. So thankfully we have things like ITP in our jail to help those folks. But community-wise, we need more available treatment. We need more readily available mental health services where people can access them faster. In the recovery community, I feel like could, do some things to make people feel a little more welcome. And some of our meetings need to be a little more welcoming to folks.
Yes.
But you know, we do have, you know, great services like Metro Drug Coalition who, you know, and all the things they're doing, they're wonderful. And I mean, we have some really good things going on in Knox County, and I'm really proud of that. But, you know, we just need more funding for the appropriate programs for people.
Absolutely. So, also, last question. If the sick and suffering addict were sitting right in front of you, what would your message be to them?
You can recover.
I like that. She is a woman of few words. Recovery Court was right about her. I want to thank you so much for being on Progress Not Perfection, and I love what you do, and just keep doing what you're doing. I think it's absolutely amazing, and I'll put that call into the governor. I'll be one of those to call.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Knoxville, pick up your phone. We need more funding. Well,
Across the state.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. My name is Della. This is Samantha Monday, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Someone told me that she was a woman of few words, but I felt like she gave a lot of good information, and it was an honor to meet her. And I can't wait to see what she does next, because I feel like she's a woman on the go, and she's got one hell of a mindset.